Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to Christians Living in the Real World, episode 8. I have a special treat for you today. And this is the power of the internet because my last episode 7, a friend of mine from high school actually connected me with today's guest. And I just love the power of the internet because I'll tell you what, high school friends, like, it's a long time ago. So, it's kind of amazing that we can still keep in touch that way. But yes, I'm delighted. We've got Tara on today. She is a boy mom, and her passion is for raising boys as men of God, and it is also for the moms, and not just boy moms, but all moms who just day in, day out are just doing the hard work of just being a mom. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her, and then just I got some questions for you, girl.
Sounds great. So yes, I'm a mom of 4 boys. So my oldest is 16, and then I have a 1-year-old. And so in between there, I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old wedged in between there. So a huge age gap that wasn't really planned, but was planned by God.
That's right. That's right.
And so I have some built-in babysitters. So it does work out well for me.
That's awesome.
We have homeschooled for almost the entirety of I think since my oldest was in first grade, we started homeschooling. There was a year where they were in the charter school. So we do have some, public school in there a little bit, but we lived in North Carolina for 14 years. And then my husband's job took him all the way to the West Coast. So we moved all the way from North Carolina to California, which was a huge change for our family, for our Southern boys. Of
course, yes.
And so that's where we ended up doing full-time RV living. And so we had our 3 boys at the time living in a 40-foot RV, Jani, and
I can't imagine
all the energy that comes with for 3 years. We did that for 3 years.
3 years. Yeah, I'm trying to picture that. I'm seeing like little people bouncing off of the interior walls.
I don't know how we didn't just explode out of that RV. I don't know how it stayed together, honestly. But the benefit of doing that in California was it was nice weather. We were able to get their energy outside, and we did a lot of hiking. We were outside a lot. So, but it was an experience. It was an adventure. Like, you need any more adventure being a mom of 3 boys.
Right. Yeah. Let's just make it a little bit more adventurous.
Right. So by the time I had the baby, it was just way too cramped to continue living in the RV. My husband had another job transfer. And so we figured it was time to sell the RV and get into a home, which I am so thankful for.
Yes.
So we are still in California, just more in the desert area now in a home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. That is awesome. And so yeah, I just, love the fact that you have this passion. And I will direct the audience at the end to your website because you're just incredible content for moms, again, in general, just for all that you face on a daily basis. But you really do focus on what it takes to raise a young man in today's world in a manner that will honor God and that will serve them and the Lord through the rest of their adult lives. And that's a big challenge. So what do you see as really the most significant challenges that of course it's different from when I was raised, but even different from when you were raised. And so, yeah, just talk us through that.
Well, parenting is challenging no matter the era. I mean, I think about how did they do it way back then before they had, the things to keep the video games to keep them preoccupied in the car. And
you know what they did, Tara? I'll tell you what they did. They said, "Go ride your bike. We'll see you at dinner."
Right, exactly.
But you don't do that in this world either.
You don't. And a lot has changed. Yeah. And I think the biggest aspect, if I could say the biggest aspect to the change was the rise in technology. Now, we talk about how beneficial that is. I love the fact that I can homeschool my kids, turn on Miss Rachel for my 1-year-old. If you've never seen Miss Rachel, oh my goodness, my 1-year-old loves Miss Rachel. Turn on, Miss Rachel for my 1-year-old. It entertains him for a while so I can get things done. I mean, we're connected via technology. There's so many resources. My kids don't have to go to the library like I did and do the hard work for the research papers. Right. I mean, they just have to cite a website. So it is so beneficial. At the same time, for parents, it has really raised a lot of a new set of challenges for us. For example, our kids are being exposed to things at a much younger age than they ever were before. And as a mom of boys, especially, I have to be very, very mindful of that. And Jani, they don't have to have a phone or a computer for this stuff to come to them. You can be watching an innocent show and an ad pops up, or my son was watching one of his favorite kids channels, and I had to explain to him something that was in there that I couldn't believe. I'm having these conversations at such a young age. And so that does set a new set of challenges for parents. There was a study done, I think it was by the University of Oklahoma, and I'm just talking about right now, they just interviewed some young adults who were exposed to pornography, and they wanted to know the average age of first exposure, and it was astounding. The average age from this poll was 9.5 to 10 years old, their first exposure, and over half of them were saying that it was accidental. So this was something that they didn't intend. It popped up, or they were going to a site, and it was a different site, or a friend had access to a phone, or something like that. So parents are having to be really cautious, having conversations very, very early. Hopefully, I always find it interesting that of all things, we hand our kids technology with unbridled trust. We say, I trust you. And until you break that trust, then I'll set up rules and boundaries. But our kids shouldn't have to bear up underneath that. I mean, that's a huge temptation. We don't hand them keys to the car at 11 years old. And even the state says they can't have their license until 16 because they can't be trusted. They can't check into a hotel at a certain age. They can't buy alcohol or cigarettes because why? Not because they've broken the trust yet, but because we shouldn't be handing them
not age appropriate.
But we hand them a phone and say, I trust you. And there's so much that the world is offering to them through there. And they really shouldn't, as our job as parents, we really need to be cautious. And so that's so challenging as a parent to navigate that. Now, my 2 older boys just now got phones. So navigating that, of course, there's a lot of rules that we lay down. There's a lot of parental controls that you can have, but navigating that is very challenging for parents. And just, you have to be so forward. You have to be so intentional and
try to be a step ahead, which is almost,
Exactly. Yes. And also it is really, it's that the rise in technology is interfering with that parent-child connectedness. That's so critical to the children's future. And, I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I can be, and there's been many times I've been guilty of this, being present in the home, but not being present with my kids. I've had to delete that app TikTok from my phone because it is so addicting. The average adult spends 4 hours of screen time a day. The average teenager spends 9 hours of screen time a day.
Oh my word.
So where is that, a relationship coming in between the parents and the children? But why is that important? Well, there's been numerous studies done about children who have good relationships with their parents, that are connecting with their parents, even sitting down. There was a study done with that, just the kids who are sitting down and having meals with their parents, and linking that to less alcohol abuse later in life, substance abuse, violence, just a myriad. I mean, the list could go on and on. So it's just taking away from the relationships. So if I could say the biggest change that has happened and the challenge for parents now is dealing with the rise in technology and all the things that plays into. So
agreed. I can't agree more. And you just, the way kids talk to one another is through their phone instead of having a conversation. I mean, the whole skill set of relationship has just been, and it's something that's learned when you're a child. I mean, that's the time to, grow and make mistakes and figure it out. And you think, my goodness, when you go into the working world, I mean, how are you going to navigate that if someone
it's lost? That connectedness is lost. Yes.
That skill set. Yep.
Yeah.
So in terms of boys, beyond technology, I mean, I had one daughter. I now have 2 grandsons. So, I'm learning all about the energy and such, but they're still little. But quite frankly, and you and I haven't talked about this. I mean, we kind of talked about a few things before we jumped on, but it just makes me wonder how you navigate the cultural. There's no other way to say it, but like demasculine. What's the word? Demasculinization. is that a word? If not, I just made it up. of men, the whole toxic masculinity. I mean, God made men, God made women, and yes, there are only two genders. But men in particular are shamed, for being men today. And so how do you teach them?
So, raising boys is unique and different than raising girls. And by that, I mean, we have a different North Star that we're aiming at. We have a different goal in mind when it comes to raising boys. And we're thinking about raising boys, we should be thinking about creating good leaders in the home, manly, strong men who are spiritual leaders who won't back down, and you're right, that is so attacked in our culture now. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see that the manliness through the feminist movement and is just so attacked, and still raising boys and teaching them the way God designed them to be. And so through our parenting and I felt tremendous pressure when I found out, like, I'm having a fourth boy. Like, that's a lot of responsibility, because
that's a lot of testosterone.
And so just knowing that one day there's going to be a mom of a daughter who is going to entrust her daughter to my son's care, and have I done a good enough job, with the help of God, in creating him to be the leader, the strong man that daughter will need, and the leader in his home to raise a family. And so our North Star in raising boys should be to create them to be good leaders, to be men of integrity inside and outside the home. So that kind of navigates how we approach situations day to day.
Okay.
There's a lot of times as a mom, I want to come in and I want to rescue my kids. I want to take them out of every uncomfortable situation. And, and thankfully I have a husband too, who has, there's a lot of single women trying to do this on their own. And that is challenging because they don't have that example. The boys aren't having that, example. And that's why I think it's so important to get into church, show them godly, strong men. And so, but my husband comes alongside me and says, you're really doing them a disservice by doing this. For example, they were on a soccer team and they didn't really have a nice coach. And I wanted, they kind of wanted to quit, and I wanted to rescue them from that. I wanted them, to talk. I didn't want them to talk back to their coach. I had a side conversation with the coach about the way he was talking to my kids. But my husband's like, you know what? This is life. This is what they're going to have to deal with in as they go into jobs. And I've had bosses that I don't necessarily like or enjoy working under, but that is part of life. And so they need to finish what they started. They need to have a proper respect for their coaches. And, we'll talk to them about, look, this is the type of man that it has, does not control his tongue. And this is affecting, they can learn other aspects. Right. So knowing that is my knowing what your North Star is, and just keeping that in mind, and that it's about developing the character that you want to see in them as they're adults, will help you navigate everything.
Let me just tell you, as a girl mom, boy, I just love moms like you. and I am honestly, I'm the beneficiary. I'm the recipient of my son-in-law is the son I never had. He's everything that you've just described. And I know that could have gone any which way. Yeah. And so I am so thankful. And I will say to the girl moms out there as well, I just remember fasting and praying even before I had my daughter, for the family that their spouse would be raised in, and that they would be godly humans, right? Yeah. And that prayer was answered. God does answer prayer.
Yes,
so I love that. And maybe you've probably started to answer. If you were just to name really like the top 3 things that you focus on to prepare your boys to be those young godly men in the world, and it sounds like you probably already scratch the surface of that, but what else?
So I think the very number one thing that we've focused on, and there may have been years that we didn't focus on it as much, and I'm just praying that God redeems that time. But focusing on helping them be grounded in their faith. So what I mean by that is not dragging them to church every Sunday just because that's the thing to do, not just telling them, no, this is what we believe in, this is, this is right, this is wrong, but really helping them with the critical thinking as far as when they get into this world, nobody is exempt from hardships, not even our kids, as much as we would like them to be. And they're going to have to they're going to question their faith. They're going to question what they're believing in. So really giving them answers and giving them a good foundation in their faith and why they believe what they believe. Now, my boys are really good in kind of challenging me in certain areas. Like this doesn't, why are they ask really good questions? So we're able to walk through those together, but we also do sit down after dinner every day and do our devotions. And that, it's just a short little thing, but it opens up conversation, and we're able to talk through that, even down to why do we believe the Bible? I mean, everything I'm telling you is from the Bible, but why are we basing our entire life on the Bible? It's important for them to know that. So, it looks different at every age. And, grandmas, you play a critical part in this as well. I was with a group of ladies who talked about who was the most influential person in their life with their Christian walk. 80% of them, this was just this past week, said a grandparent. Their grandparent, one of them said that my grandma would give me candy for every Bible verse I memorized. And I thought it was so stupid. I thought it was so silly, but she's like, guess what? I still remember those Bible verses. And when I did it as an adult, she's like, and then I realized that's what my grandma was doing.
Right.
And, we always teased my grandma because every time we would get around her, of course, she has the relationships with her grandchildren too. She's doing other things besides just drilling in Jesus all the time. But we tease my grandma because we always say, oh, we're going to get a lecture now. Okay, we're getting a lecture from grandma. But honestly, some of my core beliefs are based from those lectures, like how she lived it out in her life too. But it does look different at every age. I mean, your younger grandkids, singing the Jesus songs and telling them the exciting stories before bed, or Bible stories before bed. And then as they grow older, talking about salvation, some of the more fundamental things. And then teenagers really diving into apologetics and the lies of cultural lies. And I think we had mentioned that Mama Bear Apologetics book.
Yes. Anyone who's listening, Mama Bear Apologetics. What a fabulous! Oh, you got your copy. Awesome. Yeah, it is a fabulous book.
It's a great reason.
And something you said, I just really want to drill down on for a second, because in the world today, in the world that we face, there's such black and white linear thinking. It's like you must believe this or you must believe that, and even when kids go off to college, oftentimes they're told what to think, not given the opportunity to explore how they think and decide on their own what they think. And that is just so critical. I mean, that is probably one of the best skills, human skills that we can give our kids, is teach them how to think through consequences and long-term, effects of their decisions and their choices.
I totally agree.
But right now it just feels like things are so polarized, and it's either, well, you think this or you think this. And not only do I disagree with you, you're a bad person if you think this, right? And there's so much pressure on them in that regard, and their minds are still developing. So developing that critical thinking is really, really paramount.
Right. And, I've seen so many, I grew up in a Christian school, and I've seen so many of the, fellow classmates just fall away because they were confused. They were never taught that critical thinking. And so I knew that was something that was going to be very important in parenting. And there's only so much you can do as a parent too, and then you pray and ask God to take over.
Absolutely.
Yes. Another one I would talk about, which not necessarily is founded on the Bible, but it is resiliency. And this has teaching your boys, especially resiliency. This has an effect on your Christian walk. And also it will carry over into your marriage, your parenting, your career, but just the capacity to withstand and recover quickly when hardships of this world come. Like I said, no one's exempt. And just to keep pushing forward, regardless of things being overwhelming or intimidating. I think we model that a lot as parents or grandparents in our own life and how they see us reacting.
That is so true. We can talk, right? But especially the older they get, I mean, they see us modeling. Either you're buying your own story or you're not.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And they will school us very quickly.
They will. They're quick to point it out, and they can make it sound a fake. Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, Galatians 6:9, I always would quote to them about, let us not grow weary in well doing, for at the proper time that we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And just telling them, it might be just, you might not see it for a long time, but you keep doing that right thing. And I give them, biblical examples too. Joseph, Joshua, David. I love David because a lot of his own downfalls was his own doing. And so, but just the fact that he accepts responsibility, he asks forgiveness, and he moves forward. And I think that's really important. Side note, as a parent too, to accept responsibility when you fall and apologize to your kids.
That's right.
And show like, I'm sorry, I failed. I promised I wouldn't yell at you, and I did it again. I lost my temper, but I'm going to try harder. And just them seeing that is the part of the process of living a successful Christian life is getting back up and just being resilient. So, we could go on and on about things, teaching boys proper respect and manners and etiquette, and how that just makes them honestly stand out in a crowd, because that is unusual now.
Well, and again, I mentioned this to you the other day when we met. I was on your site, and please, at the end, guys, when we give you the information, please check out Tara's site. It's awesome. But it is you have something on there just about the simple handshake, and just looking people in the eye and putting your hand out. And my grandson, I think I told you, had just gone for his little kindergarten interview, or maybe not interview, but open house night, and he walked right up to the principal, and he's just a little peanut, and he put his hand out and looked him in the eye, and of course my daughter and son-in-law were beaming. But what you said is so important, because that used to just be the baseline, and now that stands out.
I think it's because we have a lack of time now we're spending with our children instilling these manners. And I was trying to figure out why it's so abnormal now. And we're just busy. We're a busy culture now. Corey ten Boom said, if the devil can't get us to sin, he's going to get us busy.
He's going to keep us busy. That's right.
In our busyness, we're not really and it's easy to let the time get away from us and not instill the proper manners. And just and shaking a hand, like how much that matters throughout their entire life. Just that little etiquette of making eye contact, shaking a hand, and how that can say 100 things about themselves without even saying a word. That's just one aspect of manners.
That's right. That's right.
And then
go ahead. Well, but before we move on to the next thing, you did mention grandparents. Thank you for mentioning that. And maybe this is a whole nother segment, so we won't spend much time on this one. But how can a grandparent, speaking directly, grandma to either a daughter or a daughter-in-law, what would be ideal for you in terms of help, and what's not helpful?
Okay, so first of all, I am so thankful for my mom and my mother-in-law's role in my life, not only my life, but how they have just invested in my kids. And I can tell you that I think it's going to be very difficult when I step into that role, and just that how your roles change, and it's different in how you're now parenting and having to manage that role. I think one thing that does not change and should not change, that I don't know if grandparents or just mothers of older children who have are more independent now realize that their kids you should still be your kid's biggest fan. Your
Mm.
kids need that encouragement, and they're still looking for that affirmation from their parents, even though that they're adults, and they still need
Oh,
that
I love that.
encouragement. And we have social media that reminds us that there is some other mother or father doing it way better than we are, and we are inadequate. And it's very easy to start letting
Sure.
what we think, dictate, just who we are as a mother, and to get down on ourselves and feel like we're not doing enough. So when when my mom or mother-in-law messages me or tells me, you're doing a good job. Oh, I saw how you handled that parenting situation. Like, good for you. Or I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. Just finding those
I
things.
love that.
I know it's really easy to overlook that or think that your kids really don't need that from you anymore. But we need it more than ever. We need
I
it more
love
than
it. I love it. I love it. Well, and so I don't want to run out of time, because this is really important, because I know this is really your heart and this is your passion behind everything that we've been talking about. I mean, raising your boys, but also for other moms who, you mentioned when we chatted before, just the day in, the day out, wondering, and then that's kind of what led you to create your blog, and that's kind of what led you to really almost, I mean, really, it's a ministry for moms, that you have, to just be that voice of reason and help them understand, yes, making that 15,000th peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's it's okay, it's worth it. Keep your eye on the prize. So tell us more about that.
So I think where we find our ministry is where we've been broken. And I struggled a lot with my identity and my purpose, and just feeling so lost in the mundane things that motherhood holds. And you do wonder, when you're staying in your home, if it matters, if what you're doing matters, and you feel a little, maybe a loss of purpose. We see other people like having these huge ministries in the church, and they're being recognized, and we barely get a thank you for the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And
Right.
does it really matter? And I spent years just really lost in that. And then I came across I think this was kind of my turnaround moment. I came across a book of Susanna Wesley, and I'm not sure if you've read anything about her. She bore 18 children. She was the mother of Charles and John Wesley, who were just were the foundation of the Methodist movement, and just had a huge impact on just the kingdom of heaven. So she bore 18 children. And she just had a house full. I mean, they did not have much, but she quoted scripture to her kids, and she spent time with her kids. She allotted 1 hour specifically each week, which doesn't seem a lot until you add it up into all the kids that she had.
Sure.
For each child specifically. That doesn't mean she ignored them the rest of the week. She prayed for her children. She would put her apron over her head because she didn't have anywhere to go away from these children. And the children knew when her apron was overhead, she was praying for them. And she ended up influencing, a lot of the theology that Charles and John Wesley had. And her impact alone lived on from the 17th to the 18th century to modern day. And just because of the sons that she raised. So don't let anybody tell you that your ministry is not within the four walls of your home, that what you're doing and raising those kids, it's line upon line, precept upon precept. It's not done in a day. And you may never see the full ramifications of what you're doing inside of the home, but it matters. What you're doing to further the kingdom of God matters right within the walls of your home, even if you just have that one child that you're just pouring into daily. And I think it's so important to remind mothers and encourage mothers in that fact, because I have talked to many mothers who feel or felt the same way that I did. And that's a very lonely feeling, and just knowing that there's so much more. There's so much more.
So if I might interject, so we in our coaching practice, we really focus on our thoughts and what you're saying. And I just want to draw everyone's attention to this, because this is true of everything in life. What I'm hearing you say is, I was feeling this, and they were feeling the same thing. But the truth is, our feelings come from our thoughts. And so, give me an example. What would have been the thought behind, if I'm feeling I'm feeling invisible. I'm feeling I don't have a purpose. What would have been some of the thoughts just to help people grasp that so that maybe they can catch it in themselves when they're feeling that way, like, oh, wait, what am I thinking? Because the truth is, you know, God's word is true. It is, if it says it, we believe it, and we know that he empowers us to do it. So when he says take every thought captive, a lot of people throw up their hands and go, that's impossible. Well, it really is possible. But it takes discipline, and it takes deciding, and it takes understanding when those feelings come, like, okay, I need to back it up a step. What is going on in my head? Because I can
Yes.
choose a different thought. And what
Right.
I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, we can think about the temporal, we can think about that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and just be so frustrated that we just don't feel like we have a purpose, versus we can think about eternity. We can think about the impact. We can think about Mrs. Wesley and the impact that she's had on the entire world as a result of what she poured into those kids. I just want to point that out because it really does. It's all between our two ears, right? It all
Right.
starts there.
No, that is so important. And that is something that my identity was really it was not in Christ. My identity was in my children. And so when my children would act out in the store, I wasn't a good mom. That meant I wasn't a good mom. Or they weren't, maybe excelling in school. Well, I was a bad educator. Instead of realizing that God created me unique and special. I have been blessed with every spiritual blessing and equipped with everything that I need for these kids. That he knit them together in my womb. He gave them to me, and just reminding myself of the truth of who I am was something that I was not doing. And if you let your feelings dictate your actions, your mothering, your parenting, your marriage, things are going to go awry, because feelings are not a good indicator of truth. And that's why it's so important to ground yourself in truth. And yes, recognizing when we're feeling that way, and then going back to truth, going back to, okay, what does God say about this?
Exactly.
So,
Yep. Yeah. I mean, just there's so many women of all walks, whether it's motherhood or not, just feels so unworthy.
yes.
And when you just open up God's word and you understand, like, if you were the only human being on the planet, he still would have sent his son. He loves you so much. Like, we're born worthy.
Yes.
We're worthy just by the fact that he did knit
And
us.
you know what? Sometimes that has to do with, even our background. We're not going to feel worthy all the time. We are not going to feel the closeness of God or love all the time. But that's why we don't base everything on feelings. We base them on truth and the promises of God. And if he says it, I believe it, no matter if I feel that way. And if he says it and I believe it, that should come through with my actions, and again.
That is actually the model which I coach from, because again, our circumstances are circumstance. It is indifferent. It just is what it is. It can be proven in a court of law. It has no opinion. But what we think about that really does set into motion how we feel about it. How we feel about it plays out in our actions. Actions write the results of our life. They write the stories of our life. And if we get caught in that feeling cycle and never step back to truth, step back and understand we're responsible for how we're thinking about this. We're responsible for deciding to look at eternal versus look at temporal.
Yes.
We're responsible for all of that. That's all in the thinking mode. And when we can change that thought, we can set an entirely different course for ourselves and for our families.
Right. And I love the verse that says, trust in the Lord and not your own understanding.
Yes.
Because some things we just need to trust. We just need to look at God's word, see his promises, what he says about us, what he says to us, and trust. And we may not understand why just me? Would he, that doesn't make sense. Would he really die for just me if it was just me? And trying to figure that all out. And sometimes we get in our own heads, we get in our own way. And also the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. The Bible says it's deceitful. So we're basing everything that we're acting on a heart that's deceitful, who's trying to dictate all our actions by our feelings. And so, yeah. So
yeah, and that doesn't even account for the enemy, who just wants to bring us down. So that is a whole nother segment.
It is.
Hey, listen, I know we're going to have to wrap it up for the sake of time, which I don't even want to do, because you're just delightful and you have so many great thoughts. And Yet I want to make sure that people can find you. Everything that you're hearing, guys, today that Tara just rolls so easily off of her tongue, she has poured out into her blog and her website to make sure that you have resources, to make sure that you can be encouraged, to make sure that you have tools and ideas to raise your children. So just give them the information about that, and then we'll go ahead and close out.
Sure. So I created the website boymomsendhelp.com. And so, but it is a lot of parenting and aimed specifically for boy moms, but there's a lot of things on there for parents of that parents of girl moms could use too. And as well as a lot of devotionals that I put on to help encourage moms in their everyday life of motherhood. So, yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making the time today. And I will tell our audience that it took us a couple tries. Technology was not our friend today. And I told Tara, I'm a strong believer that when there are such obstacles where it almost doesn't look like it's just not going to happen, that someone doesn't want you all to hear such a great message. And as always, God was faithful and gave us a way to get this done.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor to be on here. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Everyone, we will see you on the next episode, and have an awesome, blessed day.